I was sitting in the warm kitchen of our house in Vermont, a ceramic mug of chamomile tea cradled between my hands, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. The room was quiet, save for the occasional creak from the old radiator and the steady ticking of the clock above the pantry. It was one of those nights where sleep just wouldn't come, where thoughts kept looping back on themselves like a song stuck in your head. The light over the sink buzzed faintly, casting a soft yellow glow across the counters. Outside, the wind rustled the bare trees, making the shadows dance across the frosted window pane. It was peaceful in a lonely kind of way. And then I heard it, the low crunch of tires on gravel. I glanced at the clock. 1:57 a.m. Only one person it could be. My wife, Jenna, had been on a 3-day business trip in Chicago. She left early Monday morning, saying she'd be back by Wednesday night, maybe Thursday morning if meetings ran long. We'd done this routine before. Her job in corporate partnerships required the occasional out-of-town visit. But this time, something had felt different even before she walked out the door. Her texts had been weirdly upbeat, full of smiley faces, exclamation points. Jenna wasn't the emoji type. Even on her best days, she kept it professional, minimal. But this trip, her tone had this almost giddy undercurrent, like she was floating. When I called her on Tuesday, her voice was light, airy, too airy. She giggled over nothing, brushed past my questions, said she was having a great time, which struck me as strange for a series of all-day meetings with software execs. I stood and moved to the kitchen window, peeking through the blinds. Headlights swept across the driveway. A black SUV rolled to a stop, and a moment later, Jenna stepped out. She looked vibrant, her coat cinched neatly at the waist, dark jeans hugging her hips, hair tucked effortlessly into a bun. She was smiling, checking her phone, then stuffing it quickly into her pocket. The driver opened the trunk, and she retrieved her suitcase, offering a brief wave before he drove off. She looked radiant, like someone returning from a spa retreat or a whirlwind vacation, not like someone who'd spent 3 days in corporate boardrooms. I opened the front door before she could fumble for her keys. "Hey," I said casually, leaning against the frame. She jumped a little. "Mark, you scared me." She forced a laugh and glanced at the house, almost like she was checking if someone else was watching. I stepped aside to let her in. Didn't mean to. Couldn't sleep. Jenna smiled again, this time more carefully. "Long day," she said, walking past me. "Glad to be home." She rolled her suitcase into the foyer and slipped off her boots. I noticed the faint sound of a text notification, a quick buzz from her coat pocket, and her eyes flicked down instinctively. She didn't check it. She didn't even acknowledge it. Just pretended it didn't happen. I shut the door behind her and followed her into the kitchen. "How was Chicago?" "Oh, same old," she said, setting her bag down and heading straight for the fridge. "Meetings, dinners, a lot of talking." She grabbed a bottle of water and leaned against the counter, sipping casually. But her eyes never quite met mine. "Looked cold out there," I said, keeping my tone even. "Glad you made it back safe." "Thanks," she replied. "We had a little snow, but nothing crazy." I watched her closely. There was something about her energy. It was buzzing, jittery, like she was still on edge from something, or maybe trying too hard to seem relaxed. She pulled out her phone, glanced at it quickly, and then locked it again. That same smile twitched at the corners of her mouth. "Anything interesting happen while I was gone?" she asked, suddenly chipper, as if trying to steer the conversation. "Not much," I said, settling back into my chair. "Just the usual. Work. Fixed that leak in the garage roof." "Oh, that's great," she said, nodding too fast. "You're always good with that stuff." She paused, standing there for a moment like she didn't know what to do next. Then she laughed, abruptly, like she remembered something funny, and stopped just as quickly when she saw me watching her. "I'm gonna shower," she said. "Feel gross after the flight." "Sure," I said. "Take your time." She disappeared down the hallway, suitcase trailing behind her. The door to the bedroom clicked shut, and just like that, the house was silent again. But not peaceful. I sat there in the kitchen for a long minute, the scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. It was floral, rich, not the one she usually wore. This one was deeper, muskier. I frowned. Maybe she bought something new at the airport? Or maybe not. I stood and walked into the hallway. Her suitcase was still zipped. No big deal. But the way she held her phone, the way she dodged my questions, it sat wrong in my gut. I could hear the water running in the bathroom now. The soft hum of the shower. I pictured her standing in the mirror, wiping off the glow she'd brought home. A glow that didn't look like business travel. And then I heard her voice. Faint. Muffled by the door, but still clear enough. Not now, please, not now. My breath caught. Was she talking to someone? I moved closer, leaned in. Silence. I took a careful step back and returned to the kitchen, heart thudding. Something was off. Not just in my head. Not just late-night paranoia. I'd known Jenna for almost 9 years. I knew how she carried stress, how she acted when she was tired or hiding something. This wasn't that. This was something else. As I stood in the middle of our quiet kitchen, the tea on the table now cold, I felt a new kind of stillness settle over me. The kind that comes before a storm. Something had changed, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know how deep it ran. The next morning, the sun rose over the frost-coated trees outside, but the warmth I usually felt waking beside Jenna was missing. Mostly because she wasn't there. I blinked at the empty side of the bed. The sheets on her side were barely creased, as if she hadn't really slept. Just laid there for a few minutes to complete the illusion. A faint trail of her new perfume lingered in the air, now more cloying than sweet. I found her in the kitchen, already dressed, her hair damp from a shower. She was typing rapidly on her phone with one hand while stirring oatmeal with the other, earbuds in. She didn't notice me at first, or maybe she did and pretended not to. "Morning," I said. She jumped slightly and pulled out her earbuds, tucking the phone face down on the counter. "Hey, didn't hear you come in. Sleep okay?" "Not really," I admitted. She gave me a quick, almost sympathetic smile. "Jet lag. I'm all thrown off too." She turned back to the stove, like the conversation was over. I sat down and watched her quietly. The silence wasn't companionable. It was heavy, awkward, like a third person had entered the room with us. Someone neither of us acknowledged but both of us felt. I took in the way she nervously stirred the oatmeal even after turning off the burner, how she peeked at her phone every few seconds but never picked it up. "You don't usually check work messages this early," I said. She glanced back. "Yeah, well, deadlines. You know how it is." I nodded. But I did know how it was. Jenna had a pretty strict no phones before coffee rule. She once joked that emails before 9 a.m. should be illegal. Yet here she was wired, alert, evasive. We ate in silence. Her phone buzzed twice. Both times, she ignored it. But I saw her eyes twitch toward it like she was resisting a reflex. By the time we finished breakfast, she looked almost restless. She stood quickly, dumped her bowl in the sink, and grabbed her coat. "I've got to get in early," she said. "Meeting with the Dallas team." I raised an eyebrow. "I thought that wasn't until next week?" "Oh, they moved it up. Just found out last night." She kissed me on the cheek, too quickly. "Love you. See you tonight." And then she was gone. The door hadn't even clicked shut before I picked up her phone. Locked, of course. She'd recently added a new passcode. Said it was because of a phishing scare at work. I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be paranoid. But it was like someone had pulled a thread, and now I couldn't stop watching everything unravel. By lunchtime, I found myself searching through old drawers for the login to our shared phone account. I hadn't needed to check in years, but I remembered setting it up together. Same carrier, same billing. Jenna didn't know I still had access. What I found hit harder than I expected. Dozens of calls and texts over the last month, all to one number. Sometimes late at night. Sometimes in the early morning hours when I thought she was asleep beside me. And always while she was traveling. The name attached to the number was Colton Blake. I stared at the screen, the name looking back at me like a challenge. I didn't know a Colton. Jenna had never mentioned one. It didn't sound like anyone from her usual social circle or work team. My mind raced through possibilities. Client? Coworker? Old friend? But something inside me was already convinced. It wasn't the name that mattered. It was the frequency, the timing, the secrecy. I clicked through the call logs. 10 minutes here, an hour there. 3 calls the night she left for Chicago. 4 on the night she got back. And then I saw it. A photo message sent at 11:52 p.m. The second night she was gone. My stomach turned. The message didn't show the content, just the timestamp. But that was enough. Jenna didn't send photos to just anyone, especially not in the middle of the night. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze, going through everything in my head. I remembered the way she clutched her phone like it held a secret. The way she laughed at invisible jokes. The perfume I didn't recognize. The sudden urgency to shower before talking. It all started to form a picture I didn't want to see. That night, she came home around 7 acting like everything was fine. "Want to order Thai?" she asked, tossing her bag on the couch. "Sure," I said, pretending not to notice her glancing at her phone every 2 minutes. We sat on the couch, takeout between us, a show playing on Netflix that neither of us was watching. She smiled and nodded at the screen but didn't laugh at any of the jokes. Every time her phone buzzed, she casually reached to silence it without looking at the screen. Her behavior was too polished, too rehearsed, like she was trying to appear relaxed. When she got up to go to the bathroom, she left her phone on the table. For the first time in days, she didn't take it with her. I hesitated for half a second, then picked it up. Still locked. Still silent. Then it vibrated. A text preview flashed on the screen. "Colton, miss you already? That thing you did with the strawberries, wow." My breath caught. The screen went black. I set the phone down gently, exactly where it had been, and leaned back like nothing happened. She returned a moment later, smiling at me like we were just 2 people having dinner, like she wasn't carrying an entire secret life in her pocket. "I'm gonna head to bed early," she said, stretching. "I'm wiped." I nodded. "Okay. I'll finish the episode." She kissed the top of my head, then paused as if unsure whether she should say something else. She didn't. She just walked away. I sat there for a while, staring at the TV but not watching. My heart felt like it was caving in on itself. Because now it wasn't just suspicion. It wasn't just intuition or guesswork. It was Colton. It was strawberries. It was real. And it was happening right under my roof. The next morning started like any other. Jenna was already dressed and in the kitchen by the time I got up. The smell of toasted bagels and fresh coffee filled the house, but there was no comfort in it. Not anymore. I watched her move around the kitchen with practiced ease, all business, like nothing had changed. Like I didn't read that message from Colton last night. She slid a plate across the table toward me. "Your favorite. Everything bagel, extra cream cheese." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My eyes drifted to her phone resting on the counter, screen down again, as always. But I didn't need to see it anymore. I knew what I'd find. "You sleep okay?" she asked, sipping from her mug. "Yeah." Eventually, I lied. She nodded and smiled faintly. "Same." There was a moment of silence between us, not the comfortable kind, but the kind where you both feel like you're standing on either side of a canyon that's growing wider every second. "I have to be in early again," she said. "Lots of prep for next week's onboarding." I barely nodded. "Sure." And then, like clockwork, she was out the door, phone in hand, not looking back. Once I heard her car pull away, I stood up, pushed the untouched bagel aside, and walked straight into the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her suitcase, which she hadn't bothered unpacking completely since she got back from Chicago. It was still half-zipped, shoved into the corner like a detail she didn't think I'd notice. I pulled it onto the bed and slowly unzipped it. Clothes, chargers, a hotel-branded robe that was definitely not from her usual chain. But tucked beneath a sweater was something I hadn't expected, a sleek, black box with a ribbon, the kind you'd find at a boutique. Inside, folded with meticulous care, was lingerie. Not the functional kind Jenna usually bought, this was something else entirely. Delicate, sheer, dangerously red. Expensive. Attached to it was a small card. No envelope, no name, just a single handwritten note. "Just for you." My stomach dropped. She never wore stuff like this for me. Not even on anniversaries. I sat there for a while, holding the note between my fingers until it felt like my hand was shaking. The box, the handwriting, the implication, it screamed in asterisk Macy, not just a fling. Someone gave this to her. She packed it. She took it with her. And she brought it back, tucked away like a keepsake. This wasn't a drunken mistake. This was something deeper. I placed everything back exactly where I found it. Zipped up the suitcase. Put it back in the corner. Then I walked into the office and booted up the laptop we shared. It didn't take long. We had a shared cloud account for photo storage, a leftover from when we were younger, more trusting. I hadn't logged in months. Maybe even longer. When it opened, the latest folder was titled Team Retreat. A weak attempt at misdirection. I clicked. There were pictures from some conference, sure. Group sh*TS. Smiling coworkers. Lanyards and name tags. But there was one picture, just one, that didn't belong. A selfie clearly taken at night. Jenna in a plush white robe holding a glass of wine, her cheek resting against someone else's head. The man's face wasn't fully visible, but part of it showed in the mirror behind them, angled just enough. He was wearing a leather strap wristwatch. My watch. The one I'd lost last year. The one I tore the house apart looking for. The one Jenna insisted I'd probably left at the gym. It was a gift from my dad. One of the few heirlooms I had. My vision blurred for a second. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. My mind reeled. I zoomed in on the mirror's reflection. It was faint, a little grainy. But I knew the design. It had a scratched corner near the crown from when I dropped it on our second anniversary trip. There was no doubt. That was my watch. On someone else's wrist. In a hotel suite. With my wife leaning against him. I didn't even realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lip. It wasn't loud or messy. Just silent tears that fell without permission. I hadn't cried like that in years. Not since my mom's funeral. It was that same feeling, the helplessness, the grief, the disbelief. But there was also rage. Not the explosive kind. Not yet. It was the cold, precise kind. The kind that simmers quietly and starts forming plans. I needed confirmation. Proof. Something I couldn't deny even if I wanted to. So that night, after Jenna fell asleep, or at least pretended to, I made a call. His name was Rick. A recommendation from an old friend who had gone through something similar a few years ago. Rick wasn't cheap, but he was discreet, fast, and had a reputation for getting answers. I told him everything. He didn't judge. Just asked the right questions, took down details, and told me he'd be in touch soon. When I hung up, I stared at the ceiling of our bedroom in the dark. Jenna was lying beside me, breathing softly, her back turned. I wondered if she was dreaming about him. If she ever thought of me at all anymore. If there was any version of this story where I was still her person. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't just an affair. This was betrayal in its purest form, layered, deliberate, and sustained. And the unraveling had only just begun. Rick moved fast, faster than I expected. Within 3 days of our first call, he had already begun gathering details. He didn't waste time with fluff. No drawn-out promises or cryptic messages. Just facts, dates, and evidence. It was the kind of efficiency you only appreciate when your life is unraveling and you need someone who won't blink while handing you the ugly truth. On a quiet Wednesday morning, I got his first update. Your instincts were right, he said plainly. She's not being subtle. He sent over a package of photos and files. I waited until Jenna left for work to open them. She kissed me goodbye like it was any other morning, like I didn't know what she was really doing. Like I wasn't holding the receipts of her double life right in my inbox. I opened the files slowly, like peeling back layers of a wound. The first photo nearly made me drop my phone. It was Jenna, in Montauk, standing outside a luxury spa resort I'd never even heard of. She was smiling. Not her polite, professional smile. Not the one she gave me in the kitchen when she needed something. This one was genuine, almost shy. Her arm was looped through a man's. They were standing too close, like magnets. And then I saw it, her hand resting against his chest. His head tilted toward hers, lips brushing her temple. Colton. Rick had confirmed his name. Colton Blake. 34. Works in real estate development. Lives in Manhattan. Divorced, no kids. Drives a silver Audi. Member of a private fitness club. And apparently a fan of spa retreats with other men's wives. I scrolled through the photos. Jenna and Colton holding hands as they walked down a garden path. Sharing a bottle of wine on a balcony. Her head on his shoulder in an elevator. A kiss on his neck as the doors began to close. I stared at that photo the longest. Her eyes were closed. His hand was around her waist. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't clumsy. It was an asterisk, mate. Familiar. This wasn't a fling. This was something planned. Something she nurtured. Rick included *TS of reservation records. Emails forwarded to him anonymously that detailed a booking for 2 at a resort on Catalina Island next month under Colton's name. Jenna had requested no phone calls upon arrival. She had used a different email, one I didn't recognize, to handle the confirmation. My hands shook as I read the lines. Private suite. Ocean view. Couples massage. She wasn't being careful anymore. Or maybe she didn't care. Rick had even managed to get a copy of an Uber receipt from Colton's account, one that showed him dropping her off a block away from our house the night she returned from Chicago. It was all there. Proof, stacked like kindling, ready to burn down everything I thought we had. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall for a long time. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to go find Colton and introduce his smug face to my fists. But mostly, I just felt hollow. Like someone had scooped out my insides and replaced them with static. And yet, I wasn't surprised. The shock had passed. Now I was just left with confirmation. I started retracing everything she'd said in the last 2 weeks. All the cover stories. The awkward pauses. The new perfume. The way she laughed into her phone and then went silent when she caught me looking. It was all there. The signs. The cracks. I just hadn't wanted to see them. That night I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the photos in her face. I acted like everything was normal. We ate dinner, leftovers she reheated and served like she was still playing house. She asked about my day. I asked about hers. She told me she might have to travel again next month. Possibly LA, she said. But it's not confirmed. I just nodded. Hope I can come next time. She laughed too quickly. Oh, it's just work stuff. I smiled. Still, a getaway sounds nice. She froze. Just for a second. Barely noticeable. But I noticed. That was the first time I realized I had an edge, knowledge. And knowledge is leverage. I stayed up late after she went to bed, copying files to a drive, creating a folder titled if needed. I saved Rick's photos, emails, everything. I printed hard copies, tucked them in an envelope and placed it in the back of my filing cabinet behind old tax returns. This wasn't just about catching her. This was about preparing for what came next. Because this was war. The next morning, I casually asked, "What's the name of that resort you mentioned for your retreat?" She blinked. What? Oh, it's not confirmed yet. You just said last night. No, I meant possibly. I'm still waiting on details. I nodded. Sounds fun. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Over the next few days, I kept playing along. Rick kept digging. He found more. Bank statements. Hidden emails. A second phone number. Even a playlist they shared on Spotify titled Waves Plus Wine. She didn't just cheat. She built a world with him. And yet here she was, sitting across from me, talking about whether we should replace the living room rug. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw a stranger. A beautiful, poised, emotionally absent stranger. And I knew. This wasn't a mistake she could walk back. This wasn't some lapse in judgment. This was a whole second life. And the clock was ticking. The evidence sat in a folder on my desk, silent and damning. Photographs, texts, screensh*, TS, receipts. A full color-coded timeline Rick had laid out in his last update, showing exactly how long Jenna's affair with Colton had been going on, nearly 8 months. 8 months of lies layered over lies, of fake business trips and late meetings, of phone calls taken in the garage and weekends spent recharging with girlfriends who didn't exist. I knew everything now. I had seen enough. But oddly, knowing didn't bring relief. It brought a different kind of clarity, a quiet resolve. I wasn't going to scream, wasn't going to cry. I was going to be deliberate. I was going to make sure that when the truth finally landed, it would hit with weight. That's when I started planning the trap. It was subtle at first. I waited until Jenna was scrolling through her phone in bed, something she always did before sleep, even when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The soft glow of the screen lit up her face. She was smiling faintly. Probably him. Didn't you mention something about a Catalina trip? I asked casually, eyes on my own screen. She tensed. Then, quickly, too quickly, she laughed. What? Oh no. That's just a maybe. Some of the West Coast team talked about doing a retreat out there. Not sure it's happening. Sounds nice, I said. We haven't done a trip together in a while. She turned to me, smiled like she was remembering to. Maybe we should plan something. I nodded. Yeah. Let me know the dates for Catalina. I'd love to come along. There was a flicker in her eyes. A misfire. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, then said, "Let's talk about it this weekend." That was the moment I knew she'd been caught off guard. She wasn't ready for me to be interested. Wasn't prepared to juggle both versions of her life when they threatened to collide. From that point on, I started building my side of the wall. I backed up everything. Rick's files, phone records, texts between her and Colton. She'd used her laptop to access a messaging app that synced to her phone. I found the cache and saved it. I even downloaded a few video clips Rick had recovered from hotel security footage, including the elevator kiss in Montauk. It was more than enough. I talked to a lawyer. Quietly, discreetly. She specialized in high-conflict divorce, recommended by a former colleague who'd survived something similar. Her advice was simple and sharp. Don't confront her until you're ready to move. Once you do, act fast. People like your wife, they get sloppy when they're cornered. Use that. So I waited. I let Jenna keep spinning her little fantasy world. I watched her leave the house at odd hours. Watched her delete messages she thought were gone for good. Watched her lie about weekend work obligations when Rick's reports showed her spending entire afternoons in Brooklyn, at Colton's place. I said nothing. Instead, I played the devoted husband. I cooked dinner. I cleaned the garage. I laughed at her stories. I smiled at her texts. Until one night, she came home later than usual, smelling faintly of wine and spearmint gum. Her coat was unbuttoned, cheeks flushed. She said she had a networking mixer. I handed her a glass of water, looked her in the eye and said, "Hope it was worth it." She blinked. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "Just glad you're home." She gave me that confused half-smile and headed upstairs. She didn't notice the envelope on her nightstand. Not yet. It was time. The next morning, I called out sick from work and spent the day preparing. I made copies of everything, one for me, one for the lawyer, one for Jenna. I labeled each set and tucked them neatly into matching blue folders. Then I sat in the kitchen and waited. Jenna walked in around 6:15, looking tired. She paused when she saw me at the table. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "But we need to talk." She froze. Her smile didn't quite make it to her eyes. "Sure. Just let me change." "Now," I said gently. "Please." She sat across from me slowly, eyes darting around like she was trying to find the exit. I reached into the drawer beside me and placed a single blue folder on the table between us. "Anything you want to tell me, Jenna?" Her eyes locked on the folder. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I could see the calculations behind her eyes, trying to figure out what I knew, how much, what to admit. "I don't understand," she said finally, her voice small. I didn't answer, just opened the folder and slid the first photo across the table. It was the one of her kissing Colton's neck in the elevator. She went pale. Her shoulders slumped. She let out a slow, shuddering breath. "Mark." I placed another photo in front of her, the two of them on the spa balcony, wine glasses raised. Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "That's not true," I said. "You meant for all of it to happen. You planned it. You lied. For months." She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. It got complicated." "No," I replied. "You got careless." She opened her mouth again, but I cut her off. "I'm filing for divorce." That word, divorce, hung in the air like a G*NSH*T. She gasped. "Mark, please. I can explain." "You already did," I said, tapping the folder. "Every text, every email, every photo. You explained everything." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She begged, sobbed, said it was a phase, a mistake, a breakdown. She said she didn't know what she was thinking. She promised therapy, swore she'd end it with Colton, said she'd do anything. But I just looked at her. Not with anger, not even sadness, just resolve. "I gave you space," I said. "I gave you love, loyalty, years of my life. You gave me betrayal. Don't throw us away," she whispered. I stood. "I'm not. You did." And then I left the room, left her sobbing at the table, because the time for talking was over. It was time to reclaim my life. The next evening, Jenna tried again. She came into the living room, barefoot, her hair down, wearing the same sweatshirt she used to throw on during movie nights. She looked soft, familiar, but none of it moved me anymore. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. I didn't answer right away. I just set down my book and gestured to the folder sitting on the coffee table. Did you look through all of it? I asked. She nodded slowly, her fingers trembling. I did. Mark, Anything you want to add? She sat on the edge of the couch, eyes red. I messed up. I know that. But I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could control it. I thought I could keep our life separate from that. I leaned forward. And what exactly was that, Jenna? A game? A backup plan? Something to make you feel alive? She blinked. No, I don't know. It wasn't about you. Yeah, I snapped. That's what makes it worse. She cried then hard, ugly sobs. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than numb. But it wasn't compassion. It was clarity. You don't get to say you love me and sleep next to someone else, I said. You can't rewrite this. It happened. It broke us. I want to fix it, she whispered. Please, Mark. I'll do anything. I already made my decision, I said. I'm not staying in a marriage that's only real for one of us. Her shoulders collapsed, and for a while, the only sound in the room was her crying into her hands. I stood and walked upstairs, leaving her in the wreckage she created. That was the last real conversation we had. I moved out a week later into a small coastal hotel just off the harbor, nothing fancy, but quiet, clean, and mine. I filed the divorce papers the next morning. 2 weeks after that, Jenna's affair became public. Colton's wife, apparently just as blindsided, posted *TS and photos online. Jenna's name trended locally for days. Her employer launched an investigation. She went dark on social media. Friends reached out unsure what to say. I told them nothing, just that I needed time. And I took it. I moved to Austin, rented a small loft, got a dog, and started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I spent late nights on the porch with a brush in my hand and the past behind me. A few months later, I met Amy. It wasn't romantic at first. We argued over the same antique novel in a bookshop, then laughed about it and got coffee. She was a college lit professor, quick-witted, down-to-earth, and nothing like Jenna. She asked questions and listened. She didn't fill silence with apologies. We kept meeting, talking. Then one day, I realized I was smiling again, genuinely, effortlessly. Jenna broke my heart, but she didn't break me. And in some strange way, she gave me back something I'd lost, the strength to start over. This chapter? It's mine. And it's only the beginning.